Hey now, it's Ruben at Help Find the Others. So the other day was pretty fun. I did a live stream, and a lot of people have messaged me and said, hey, I wish I would have known you were getting on. I would have got on there, or sorry I missed you or whatever. And I didn't plan on like people popping in. I was just kind of testing the live stream out to do a video to thank people for getting to 1,000 subscribers, which is amazing, and I can't it blows my mind that I have 1,000 subscribers already. And I know we're just getting started, so it's cool. But anyway, I didn't plan on anyone like being in the chat, and then some people popped in. And we started talking. Some more people popped in, and before I knew it, I was on there for an hour and 40 minutes. So I'm gonna do that more often. And as far as like notifying people, I think I'll definitely do it on Sunday mornings, and then maybe some nights during the week if I feel like it, or if I got something to say, or whatever. I might just do a live stream instead of recording videos. I don't know. But I'll before I go on, I will send an alert through, or I'll make a tweet. So make sure you have notifications on Twitter. Follow the link down below for Twitter, for the Twitter page. Discord and Telegram as well, and I'll put a little message on there like, "Hey, about to go live in 15 minutes" or something like that. And yeah, I'm probably gonna do that more often, at least once a week, once or twice a week, maybe. So anyway, thank you for anyone that was in the live chat. It was great. It was cool. So today I wanted to make a video, and this is a doozy of a video because I have a lot to say about it, and I have made a bunch of takes because it's hard for me to talk this long and in deep or in depth without messing up or getting off topic. So if you clicked on this, and I want to talk about the differences and similarities between LSD and mushrooms, okay? And that's what the title will say, which I know a lot of people will click on that without maybe having watched my other videos and knowing how off the cuff and rambly I am. So if you haven't watched my videos, and this is my first video you're watching of me, please stick through to the end. I'm going to try to, talk about the physical differences and stuff first and get through that quick. But I have a pretty big idea about LSD and mushrooms that I'll go through at the end that is probably pretty unique and could really help some people kind of visualize it. So anyway, my background with LSD and mushrooms. My first psychedelic experience was LSD. I did it probably too much in high school. It was all over. And I went to high school in the late 90s. I graduated in 2000 in New York. There were times I couldn't find weed and all I could find was acid. Like, it was that prevalent. It was everywhere. And, there was probably months where I did LSD every weekend. Now, I don't condone that at all because I don't think teenagers should do psychedelics at all. And I definitely overdid it as a teenager. But I also think I was a little more, of one of the chosen ones that could handle it at a younger age. So that's fine. And I definitely, I maybe didn't do it as responsibly as I would now. But I actually was pretty spiritual, and it was meaningful. It wasn't just partying, I actually that's when I started to kind of move towards, what I talk about with this channel and everything. And then when I graduated, I went to college in Kentucky. So I moved away. I had no friends, and I had to find other circles to run in. And I basically never saw LSD again until I went to music festivals. It was never around. I was able to find weed immediately. And then all the other drugs were starting to be ecstasy and stuff like that. Ketamine and stuff like that. So I was just I thought LSD went away because I moved, But little did I know, and I found out later in life, about the underground missile silo LSD bust. Which, watch the video to find out more. Type in underground LSD missile silo in YouTube, and there's a Vice documentary on it, and it's crazy. It's the biggest bust ever. The DA claims, and it's disputed, that when they busted them, the availability in the United States went down 95%. That seems a little steep, but it obviously went down a lot. The amount these people, this lab, William Leonard Packard is the guy, Picard, is the guy that was the chemist. And just read about him. He's got a really cool book too that I haven't started reading, but I bought it. It sounds really crazy. It was just a significant LSD bust that happened at the same time that I graduated high school. And even though I moved away, I have to believe it's one of the reasons that I stopped seeing LSD, or LSD stopped being a part of my life. What did become a part of my life is mushrooms at that time. I had only done mushrooms once before I moved to Kentucky, and that was the summer before I moved. It just wasn't around. I knew magic mushrooms, I'd heard about them, read about them, knew what they looked like, but they were never around. Everyone was always doing acid, so I only had, and my first experience, I was going to buy acid from someone because my friends and I, before we all moved away to our corners of the world, we're going to trip at the state park for like one last weekend. And I went to go buy acid, and the guy's like, I have mushrooms too. And I was like, oh, well, I've never tried those. Yeah, let's do that. So I bought an 8, thinking it was like weed, and split it with 3 other people. So my first mushroom experience was very low dose. Still a good time or whatever, but it led me to believe, and there's also, I don't know if that really exists now, but when I was in high school, there was this myth that LSD is more dangerous than mushrooms, and mushrooms are kind of just like in between weed and LSD, and they're no big deal. And so my first mushroom experience being so low dose, I kind of was like, yeah, I agree with that. It's not as intense as acid. I now totally believe, and I do think the view is changing in the drug culture, that mushrooms are not less than acid, and they're just as powerful, which I'll talk about. But once I stopped having availability to LSD, I started looking up how to grow mushrooms and everything like that. I ended up growing mushrooms in my dorm room in college with a friend. We even, a funny story, we even got busted. The cops came, campus security, to search our room because someone called them because we were smoking weed, and they were looking through the room, and he found the bin with the mushrooms in it and was like, what's this, boys? And we were, my friend, without even like batting an eye, goes, oh, it's for my biology experiment. And he was like, oh, I'm sorry, was it over here? Did I put it back right? And like they like put it back, and we're like apologetic. And then they're like, you see these seeds and stems? We could kick you out of college for this or whatever. We're like, yeah, okay, sorry, sir. But anyway, from that, growing them, I definitely sold them, and I imagine all statute of limitations are expired for that. I can't still be locked up for my crimes as a teenager. But anyway, I just did a lot. I started increasing the dosage, right? Because I had a ton of them. And that's where I started to realize, like, whoa, these are not to be messed with, And then, just as I started growing up and everything, I just got into other drugs. And then because of, like, playing in bands and stuff like that, I just started drinking more and everything. And my psychedelic life just kind of, like, faded back into the background. Not away, but just into the background. And then, like, I would only, maybe do Maui and stuff like that at concerts or festivals, and that was about it for quite some years, until I discovered Terence McKenna's talks and other and that whole generation of philosophers, or whatever you want to call them, and then I started with adult usage of psychedelic mushrooms, and getting into microdosing and all of that. Well, so I will say that it's been quite a while since I've done LSD, but I'm going to try my best to describe the difference. Even though the psilocybin experience is much more fresh in my mind, I have a pretty hefty background in the LSD experience, so I'll try and talk about it. The physical difference at lower doses is not much different. If you take just one hit of acid and eat maybe 2 or 3 grams of mushrooms, 2 grams. It's about the same. I'd say. I don't know though. Acid now might be different and stronger. Like everyone when I watch videos on YouTube, everyone seems to know the micrograms they have and stuff like that. When I was in my teens and 20s, I didn't know what a microgram was, and it was just 1 square, 2 square, 1 gel tab, 1 sugar. It's just like numbers of units of whatever someone put on there, and I didn't test it. I don't know. I don't think I did a lot of research chemicals, but who knows? Because that's well, I'll talk about that in a second. But once you start upping the dosage, LSD is more like energizing. You want to you feel the energy of life. You hear all these stories about people running around naked. Like you get that feeling, and the more you do, the harder it is to contain that feeling, and you can totally understand why in the 60s, like, everyone's flopping around naked and stuff like that, because they're, you have this, like, energizing, like, life force through you. And mushrooms, you can sometimes get that, but for the most part with me, mushrooms are more, like, tranquilizing. There's a body load. There's a, it makes you want to, like, you feel heavy. It makes you just want to lay in the grass and look up at the stars. Like it just seems to want to, like, tell you something. So it's like, sit down and tell, or whatever. To where LSD seems to be, you have like epiphanies, but they're all like in your head. They're all your brain. I really like, mushrooms seem to have a voice, and I've definitely heard them talk to me. But they've altered other sounds to sound like human language in my head. But they're definitely, like, there's a lesson, right? To where I feel like LSD is like the ultimate nootropic drug. Where I don't know if anyone's familiar with nootropics, but they're drugs that improve cognition and mental performance, and not necessarily get you high, but do alter your mood a little, and they're mood enhancing cognition drugs or whatever. And LSD is like just that times 1,000. That you have these epiphanies, but they're not really a lesson. They're you just like your brain running at like full potential. It's like unlocking everything. Now mushrooms, you have kind of that too on lower doses, but the higher it gets, the more it like takes over. LSD will take over in higher doses too, but I don't know. There's a lot of crossover between the two, but if it was like a bubble or a bubble chart or whatever, there's more of the like energizing epiphany side of LSD here, and then more of the like heavy stoning, taking control along for the ride thing with mushrooms. I find, and all of this is just my observation of it, because I know personally people that feel the exact opposite for the two drugs. But I feel that mushrooms can be much more scary. And I don't mean like something that scares you. I mean just like an overall sense of like paranoia and like dread sometimes. Like I'll be sitting in a chair and I'm just on my beautiful back porch. It's nice out and everything, and there's no one there, and I'll be like, and so like I don't know what that is, because I don't get that with acid. I feel like powerful on acid. I felt, but I was also a teenager too. I don't know how that would be now. It just, I think it's the energizing factor that, like, if something's scary, you're just going to get up and leave. To where mushrooms, you're like, you got this body load going on and you can't leave, and you're just, it's just washing over you, And the other thing that I've noticed is I've had bad trips on both drugs. The bad trips on LSD didn't last long and didn't last after the drug was gone. I would do acid the next day if I could after a bad trip. Like, it didn't bother me. To where mushrooms, my bad trips stick with me to this day. They're much more reality shattering. They've taught you a lesson. There's much more information involved, I feel like, almost, or something. And they just, it sticks with you, you know, to where my bad LSD trips, I'm just like, oh, that was weird, you know, or whatever, and it didn't bother me, and that's not age dependent. Like, I mean, I have bad mushroom trips from when I was, you know, 22 or whatever that like still bother me. So yeah, again, they're very similar. That could be the same. We could just be talking brain chemistry or brain makeup. But that's my experience with the two drugs. I will say, and it's a common thing that people say, that LSD is a clean high, right? Or cleaner experience. My interpretation of that is that, like, okay, so when I'm on mushrooms, it's all like, I mean, it does come in waves. You know, like you'll just be very like, whoa, you know, like overwhelmed, and then you like come out of it, you're like, whoo, whoo, and then you'll get overwhelmed again. And with acid, I don't recall any moments where I was actually overwhelmed. I recall like about 10 minutes later going like, holy crap, we were really fucked up right there. I don't even know how we ended up here. Who drove, you know, or whatever. Like, I mean, there's those things where you're like, in the moment, it's very clear and everything makes sense. But then looking back at like, you know, the past 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, you're like, holy shit, how, you know, when did we get arrested? You know, like, and it's weird. It's weird like that. And movies do a very good job of, like, that, like, stop cuts or whatever of like, you know, showing LSD trips and people are like, ha, laughing, and then like all of a sudden they're like cooking or whatever, you know, it's like like that kind of manic, like stopping, starting, going to different spots. Acid does that, or I remember it doing that to me, to where mushrooms is just more like this, like the world has, you know, changed, which also leads me into like the difference in visuals. Mushrooms seem to like alter the environment more to where, you know, walls breathe, trees move, stuff like that, to where my visuals on LSD were much more like tracers, with like people moving their arms. It affects like technology more, like lights and lasers and glow sticks and stuff like that are like way cooler on LSD. They're still cool on mushrooms, but like, mushrooms, just the stars look amazing. Everything, like, it's just it alters your environment a little more, and eventually all the way, you know, like, I now the most vivid hallucinations I've ever had were on LSD, but it was also on like a Megadose, and there would be no way to well, I'll tell the story real quick. There would be no way to determine how much I ingested. But I went over to a friend's house who, he wasn't an LSD chemist, but he used to get liquid and put it on sugar cubes and sell the sugar cubes. And I went over to his house because I'd been partying there the weekend before, and I left a bottle of Jaeger in his house. Well, it was a trailer, actually. It wasn't a house. It was this shitty old, like, Trailer Boys type trailer park. And I left a bottle of Jaeger in his freezer. And I was like, hey, man, can I get that Jaeger? And he's like, yeah. And I looked in the freezer, and all there was my bottle of Jaeger and then a piece of notebook paper that looked like it had, like, stains all over it. And I was like, what's this piece of paper in here, man? And he was like, oh, dude, that's fucking straight up liquid, dude. I was dipping cubes and put that in there. He's like, Lord knows how many hits that is. And me and, like, 3 or 4 other people were over there. I was like, can we eat it? And he's like, yeah, fuck it, whatever. He's like, I already made my money back on the cubes. Yeah, let's eat it. And so everyone's just like ripping off, you know, just like, you know, eating pieces of paper. And everyone's like, nobody realized how bad of an idea that was, that nobody's like measuring out how much acid we're all doing, right? And so it became very cartoonish pretty quick. And I've been to that level with mushrooms. My 5-gram dosage, like, everything was cartoonish, you know, like it was just kind of a bizarre realm that I was in. But then someone got the idea. We had Glowsticks, and everyone was playing with those. And I remember I was so energized and amped up, I was like frantically pacing around the room or whatever. And I was getting kind of upset with the glow sticks, and I took one and I whipped it as hard as I could against the wall, and it cracked it and splattered on the wall, and and it was like, this like glow in the dark mural or whatever, and everyone was like, whoa. And so they started breaking the glow sticks open and splattering them all over the place in this fucking shitty trailer. And then we turned the black lights off or whatever, and it was pitch black except for these glow sticks. And people were smearing the glow sticks on themselves. And I was like transported into space. I was like floating around, right? And I mean, I must have looked like an idiot because I felt like I was swimming in space. And I was seeing nebulas, and I mean, it looked like this, literally. And I was like, oh my God, and for I don't even know how long, until all of a sudden there was police lights. And I was like in space, and I saw like blinking lights, and I turned, and I was in space, but there was a window. And I saw through the window police get out of the car and say, they're in there, they got the acid. And then all of a sudden I was like, back in the room, and I'm seeing all these people like smearing stuff on their face, and they're all like in my face, like, and I'm in sheer terror. And I run out the back door of the of the trailer, and I just keep running, and I run into the woods, and I have this terrible time. I kept hearing like things rushing past me, going like, they're coming to get you, they're coming to get you. And I'm like, I'm just in the woods. And then I was like, I'm gonna get lost if I keep running. I need to hide. And I like laid down, and this is at night, and I'm like laying down behind a log in the woods, and I'm like, the cops are coming, the cops are coming. And I'm there for who knows how long. And then all of a sudden, like, people are like calling my name, and I hear them, but I don't say anything because I think they're the cops, and they're looking for me, and they got flashlights. And then like they find me, and then they tell me like, what are you doing? Why'd you run? And I was like, the cops are coming. They knew we had acid, and they were like, the cops were like 3 trailers away because some dude was hitting his wife. So I like totally like had this vision that didn't happen, And I thought it was terrible. But again, to go back to what I was saying, that's a pretty bad trip, right? That didn't bother me at all. I think we were doing acid there the next weekend, But that is one of the most intense open eye visuals I've ever had, was on LSD. And like I said, I don't know how much that was. I've taken a 10 strip before, and it wasn't as intense as that. So I don't know. But I know from reading other people that have done like 30 grams of mushrooms and stuff like that, like the visuals get even more intense than that. So to say which is more visual than the other, I don't know. That's really hard to do because it's really hard to compare the dosages. So yeah, I don't know. Which leads me to believe like one thing with LSD is to have like an ego death experience with LSD, you could do accidentally and even unknowingly. To do that with mushrooms, you have to intentionally do that, and it's hard to do. To ingest that amount of mushrooms is hard to do. So I don't know, like. That's just kind of a weird difference between the two. If you could get, synthesize psilocybin or whatever, or get it down. I've read about people doing extracts and stuff like that. Then it's easier to have a high dose experience. But if you're looking for a full on immersion thing, like LSD is your best bang for your buck too, because the price difference is crazy between the two. $5 of LSD will get you what an eighth of 2-3 grams of mushrooms will get you. That's a pretty good difference, right? Now, the one thing you do have to run into, and where mushrooms is good, is like as long as you know what mushrooms are supposed to look like, you got good mushrooms when you get a bag of them. When you get acid, you have no idea. It could be there's a whole bunch of research chemicals and stuff like that you could end up with. So it's safer to be a mushroom user because you're probably not going to get bunk stuff. But if you are going to do LSD or any other drug that is a chemical, you need to get a test kit to be able to test it. And I strongly recommend that for people. As far as the dosaging, I know people microdose with LSD as well as mushrooms. That's got to be harder to do. It's a very cheap way to microdose, but you're cutting little pieces of paper, and I don't know how you would weigh it out. So I don't have any experience with microdosing LSD, so I can't compare the differences between that. I love microdosing mushrooms, and microdosing mushrooms to me seems a little more natural because it would be like eating 2 mushrooms that you find, which would be a very natural thing for a human to do. When there's a huge flush during a full moon, you would eat a whole bunch and have this spiritual experience. But generally, humans were probably microdosing mushrooms. And there's a lot of research to show that it's beneficial even at low dosages. To where I don't know if LSD is beneficial other than a mood thing. But as far as like your actual brain neurons and stuff like that, like low doses of mushrooms are good to take for your brain. Now the difference in chemistry, there isn't much. The tryptamine class of psychedelics all basically have the same chemical structure as serotonin, which is in your brain. DMT, psilocybin, and LSD are kind of all the same. But the anecdotal evidence strongly suggests that these are very different drugs that do very different things in your brain, which is why I'm always stressing to, we need research. We need research in psychedelics. Like, that's what, instead of researching missiles and new missiles and bomb guidance systems, we need to have the best brains in the world researching psychedelics, because I think we're really onto something with psychedelics that humanity needs us to explore, which leads me into I actually wrote down my stuff is why I keep looking over here, which leads me into my background is in biology, in macrobiology. Okay, I'm not a microbiologist or an organic chemist. I never really had much understanding of like the little minutia of how things work, but my focus of studies is evolution and organismal biology. So it's I look big picture. I look cross generations. I look, I'm interested in forest succession, and that's where I've like had some jobs and stuff like that, and environmental restoration. I look hundreds and 200 and 300 years in the future when I'm thinking about biological situations, which is what psychedelic drugs. I don't see them as a drug or a recreational pastime to get loaded and whatever. Like, they can do that, but they're part of our biology. That's what I think we need to be exploring. And, there seems to be a sentiment in the psychedelic world that, like, mushrooms are, you getting back to your roots. They're more important because they're this ancient tradition that, we've forgotten more of than we've ever even learned. It's this, the stoned ape theory that mushrooms catalyze human evolution and all this, and they're more important because of their how long they've been a part of humans, and how they've evolved with us and stuff like that. And I agree with that. I agree with the importance of psilocybin mushrooms. But that same camp that talks about that seems to discredit anything that is synthetic or semi-synthetic, as that if a human made it, then it's not that important of a substance. That the plant teachers are the things that are important. The plant teachers are the things that can provide real therapy and real insight. And I don't think that's true. And my view is that psychedelics in general are evolving along with our human consciousness. So mushrooms, and peyote as well, are substances that have existed that predate technology, predate language, predate domesticated fire. Okay? They were just something you ate and you had this experience, and it did whatever it does. So I look at it as mushrooms may have catalyzed human evolution from ape to something more, but I think they've continued evolving with us. If you look at ayahuasca, which is probably the next in the timeline of human usage of psychedelics, is probably the next big thing. Ayahuasca seemed to catalyze society. You know, you look at the Mayan and Incan cultures that were using this stuff, and the shamans and the shamanistic culture in South America. They created pyramids before they should have known how to do it. They created these, you know, huge societies and stuff like that. And if you ask shamans, who taught... Now, you needed technology to make ayahuasca. You needed fire. You needed a pot. You needed to know 2 plants that contain 2 different drugs to combine to make this tea and whatever. And if you ask shamans, you know, who taught the shaman culture how to do this, how to make ayahuasca, their answer is the plants told us. So maybe they're talking about mushrooms. Maybe mushrooms, you know, the voice that I said they have, led humans, nudged them in the direction to figure out how to make ayahuasca. And maybe this built societies, okay? And this has led to now we have LSD. This is the current phase of human evolution of consciousness, I feel. That it doesn't exist naturally. Humans had to evolve to the point to understand chemistry to be able to create it. You know, it has a organic precursor in the ergot fungus from grain. But you can't just eat that fungus and have an LSD experience. You have to take its extract and add stuff to it. Again, I don't know the chemistry. You can look that part up, but something inspired Albert Hofmann in 1938 to do that, right? I mean, it wasn't just dumb luck. I don't believe that, because LSD has been too important to humankind to just be dumb luck. And that's what I mean is think about LSD. It's not even 100 years old. Not even 100 years old. And look at the impact it has had on, well, especially America, but I mean the world. Look at the 60s. The 60s are drenched in LSD. LSD and the fear that was caused in society by it led to the whole war on drugs. You know, I mean, yes, there was crack cocaine and stuff like that in the 80s, but, you know, Nixon cracking down on hippies and everything like that, and you know, when they really started cracking down on LSD and how afraid of Timothy Leary the government was, and the acid test with the Grateful Dead and all of this stuff, that was a big deal. You know, we were also going through the Vietnam War and all of this stuff, and I mean, it's when LSD was in the spotlight, it was a big deal in human society, and that's just in the news stories, right? I think actually the biggest deal with LSD is behind the scenes. And so I don't know if anyone knows about Francis Crick. Francis Crick and Watson, I don't know what Watson's first name was. They came up with discovered and came up with the structure of DNA and how DNA works. And that is probably one of the single most, brightest turning points in American science or in human science, understanding how, why our bodies do what they do, and realizing what we can do with it and what we can look to the future of what people will be doing with their DNA and everything like that. He came up with that. That was a epiphany he had while on LSD. One of the biggest scientific breakthroughs of our lifetime, of our generations and whatever, was an epiphany on LSD. That's a pretty big deal if you ask me. And he believed that it came to him because, and they don't talk about this part, he won a Nobel Prize for coming up with LSD, but then they kind of started ignoring him, because then, after he won his Nobel Prize, he went on this big research hunt to find out what he evidence of what he called directed panspermia, which is, he thought much like Terence McKenna said about like mushrooms are spread through spores through the universe, that he said that DNA seemed to come from another planet and was a seed of life that spread across the universe, and that on any planet that has life, you will find DNA because that's how DNA works, and it starts life. So that's just fascinating, and that is all LSD inspired scientific thought, which was common around his time until they made LSD illegal. Then the scientists didn't use it anymore. You're just starting to see it now when you see these articles about Silicon Valley and you know, all this, the tech world uses microdosing for productivity. Well, that's the story that's coming out in the news. You can be damn sure they're using macrodoses too. You know, that they're going real deep and figuring it. So I think that, much like I said that mushrooms catalyzed human evolution and ayahuasca catalyzed you know, early societies, at least in South America, I think that LSD is going to catalyze science and technology and innovation and usher in a new evolution of humankind. And I think that's kind of its path. And this is a very directed thing that's kind of how human consciousness as a whole, and not just person to person, is evolving. And LSD is part of that. And it's just as important as the other ones. You know, you can have a get back to your roots experience and go eat mushrooms in the jungle and whatever. But for humanity as a whole, I think LSD is actually the more important molecule right now. And I think you'll find that with a lot of chemists and stuff like that. They believe that. And that's one reason it's so cheap, is because the chemists frequently give it away for free. That Owsley, Stanley, who is like the guy that made all the acid for the acid tests and was the Grateful Dead sound guy, blah, blah, blah. Great guy, great, interesting dude. If you want to read his book, his name was Bear, or his nickname was Bear. He used to just walk around San Francisco just handing this super powerful clean acid to everyone, you know. And he made a lot of money off of it too, but I mean, like, he believed in just getting the molecule out there. There's another guy that they don't talk about, and I mentioned him in the live stream I did, and I couldn't think of his name, but it's Captain Al Hubbard, the original Captain Trips, because they called Jerry Garcia Captain Trips. The virus in Stephen King's The Stand was called Captain Trips, but this the original Captain Trips from, I mean, in the 1950s, 1951, I think, he was hiking, and an angel came to him and said, a very important discovery, or something very important, is coming to mankind, and it's going to change the world, and you can have a role in it if you choose to. And he said, yeah, and they were like, well, wait for the sign, okay? And, or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, a year later, he's reading an article, and they're talking about lab rats being given this new molecule, LSD, and their behavior. And it clicked, and he was like, that's it. And he went about getting huge amount, like hundreds of thousands of doses of LSD in the mid-50s, and started going all around LA, giving it to therapists, giving it to, he went and met Timothy Leary and gave him LSD. Like, they call him the Johnny Appleseed of LSD, because he kind of spread it around the United States, and was kind of one of the ones responsible for getting it into all the therapists. Timothy Leary took it and put it in the streets. Captain Trips, Captain Hubbard, he was more into the therapy and thought that it could really be good for mankind. And it's a shame that there's a million books about Timothy Leary, but none about Captain Hubbard. And I don't know, Captain Hubbard's story is almost a little more interesting to me, and seems a little bit more like serendipitous and stuff like that. So, you know, I really feel that and again, I haven't done LSD in quite some time, but I read about it a lot, and I am constantly like thinking about its role with humankind, and then I see a lot of you know, posts on Reddit and stuff like that, and you know, there's definitely this like renaissance of psychedelics that seem to respect mushrooms more and and everyone just always kind of is like, LSD's cool or whatever, but mushrooms are the real like spiritual thing, and I think they're both important. I think, but again, that's just me. I one thing that I also would like to go back to is that the rise of LSD and the rise of the Grateful Dead, I mean, we're just in lockstep, right? And then the Grateful Dead died off and LSD seemed to die off. And then, if you want to go back and watch my video about cryptocurrency, if you haven't seen that, I really do feel there's this synergy where this other thing, crypto, came in, and then LSD started coming back up as far as like, how it's viewed in our society and its importance in society. And I think the future of crypto and LSD are pretty bright. I really do think, we're going to look back and see that they rose at the same time together in lockstep, and there's a synergy there. Obviously, I think that's why you're starting to see more LSD around, is because it goes through the dark web paid for by cryptocurrency. And I know that's not a direct, correlation. Like someone argued with me about that and said, just because there was a lot of LSD being made in the 60s in Pyrex labware doesn't mean that there's a synergy between Pyrex labware and LSD. And you're right, that's right, because most lab equipment's still used by legal labs that aren't making LSD. But cryptocurrency is a little different, and watch my video to see what I'm talking about with the synergy between cryptocurrency and LSD, or just psychedelics in general, not just LSD, I guess. So the last thing I want to talk about with differences in them is what my view of what the future of legalized psychedelics looks like pertaining to mushrooms and LSD. Mushrooms, I think, should be managed the same way weed is, the same way alcohol is. Well, or alcohol should be. You can get out of control with mushrooms, but I don't think you can really get out of control unintentionally. And that's where you would be a danger to anyone else, and why they should be illegal. I don't think anything should be illegal just because it makes you think a certain way. I don't like that. The powers that be think that our mind is under their jurisdiction, because it's not. But I do understand, the when drugs are made illegal, they're made that way so that people aren't a danger to themselves or other people or whatever. In order to get to that level with mushrooms, you have to eat a lot of mushrooms. You have to do that with intention. You have to sit down and sit there and eat a bunch of mushrooms. You have to know that, like, this is going to be pretty intense. So if you sold them like they used to at head shops in Amsterdam, and you could only buy 2 grams or whatever at a time, how's that any different than the way we treat alcohol? You can go get enough alcohol to kill yourself at any time at the gas station at 10 o'clock in the afternoon. You can drink yourself to death if you want. Why should we police these mushrooms any differently, right? Especially when they just grow out in the woods. So I see a legality similar to cannabis with mushrooms in the very near future, even. I mean, some people have left comments, but yeah, there's voter referendums that are going to go on in California and Oregon and stuff like that, and that's great. I would love to see that. But as far as like a federally declassification, there's going to have to, be some legitimate research that still comes out. Or the whole Controlled Substances Act needs to be turned on its head and whatever. But LSD, I don't foresee a situation where that's just legal and you can just have it. Because of how powerful it is at such little doses. You could like I mentioned before, you could unknowingly take an ego death amount. Like if you didn't like someone at work and they pissed you off, you could squirt a whole Visine bottle of liquid acid in their coffee and they wouldn't know it until, they're trying to jump off the roof or something or whatever, So because of how potent it is, it probably shouldn't be something that's just widely available. It should be available through, prescription or therapy or spiritual purposes or whatever the framework would be to set up. that's how you should be allowed to handle it. It shouldn't just be a publicly available substance, I feel like. And I know a lot of people would argue with me that all drugs should be legal and you should be able to do whatever you want. But I think when you're talking about stuff that's undetectable and super potent at small doses, like there does have to be something there to, protect people that don't intend to get to the places that these drugs can take you. Okay, 45 minutes. Wow, that's a long one. That's a lot of information. If you still stuck with me, that's great. If not, whatever. Come back and watch some of it. Watch the end. Watch the middle. Watch whatever. Whatever people do with these videos. I'm sorry this is so long, but I needed to get all that stuff out, I think. But I guess the main point is that that I was trying to get at is that just because mushrooms at lower dosages aren't that bad doesn't mean they're less powerful than LSD. And then also on the macro view, just because mushrooms and ayahuasca are older and more mysterious, it doesn't mean they're any more important than something that's relatively new on the human lifetime scale. I think LSD is just as important and will be very, 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 very important going forward for humanity. So that's it. Like I said, I'm probably going to do more live streams, and I'll set your notifications if you subscribe to me. Set your notifications for Discord, Twitter, and Telegram for when I'm going to go live. I'll give everyone a heads up. And let's see. I might be looking into doing a podcast. Someone had mentioned something about that in the live stream, and I'm definitely down for that. If anyone's interested in doing a podcast with me or whatever, or being a guest or talking or Skype, whatever, email at helpfindtheothers@protonmail.com, and we will talk again. So until next time, guys, thanks, and I'll see you later.